Hello, I'm Harvey, host of Franchising Brand Stories.
I'm Dan Archer, the founder and UK Chief Exec of Visiting Angels.
And welcome to Franchising Brand Stories Season 4, brought to you by FranRec, specialist staff and executive recruiters for the UK franchise industry. And this is the show, I'm going to do it, where we find out what's under the hat of some of the top brands in the UK and in the world. So, if you are considering investing into a franchise business, well, this show's for you. This is where we get to understand what's beyond the brochure, what's behind the brand. And we get to speak to the wonderful people that are within these businesses and in some cases have founded these wonderful businesses. So the brand story we're going to hear today is Visiting Angels, and it's with the wonderful Dan Archer. Dan, welcome to Franchising Brand Stories.
Thank you very much for having me on, Harvey. I sort of feel underdressed because I don't have a hat for anything to be underneath. I've just got a receding hairline. I've just got a hairline that used to cover more of my head than it does now. Yeah?
Why do you think I wear a hat? You don't even know if I've got any hair. They never quite find out what's under the hat completely. We'll see.
You need to keep a bit of mystique in the relationship, Harvey.
Exactly, absolutely. Well, look, what we're going to do today is we're going to have a lovely deep delve into your fascinating business, and we're going to start with chapter 1. It's traditional to start that way. And the first question that I would like to ask you, conveniently, it's there on the screen, but what is Visiting Angels for people who don't know?
Of course, yeah. So we are a domiciliary care provider. We are a home care provider. So we are providing care to predominantly elderly clients in their own homes. We are originally a US concept, so started in America some 27, 28 years ago now. And I brought the brand to the UK in 2017. We operate predominantly in the private pay market. So we are not doing the sort of wholesale commissioned work for local authorities. We are dealing predominantly with families who are finding care for their loved ones.
Fantastic, and such an important thing, a thing to do. We're a population that are thankfully living a little longer, enjoying life a little longer, a little longer in our own homes, and we certainly need people with us on that journey to make that more comfortable. Such a really important thing to do. The next thing that I really wanted to ask you is sort of where are you at now as a business? In terms of number of franchisees. What's the sort of snapshot of your business at the moment?
So we're at 71 currently. We've added 21 in the last year, so I have more grey hair than I had this time last year. We've moved relatively quickly in the last 12 months. The business, I was talking to a colleague about it this morning actually. I started from my dining room table in summer 2017. So we moved into the franchise space in 2019. So I piloted the business from late 2017 through 2018. First franchisees joined us late 2019. We went into the first lockdown of the pandemic, if we remember those halcyon days of lockdowns and the pandemic. We had 3 active locations in March 2020. So we had my office in Sheffield, which is the pilot business. And we also had West London and South Hertfordshire at that point. And as I say, we're currently at 71. So we're growing pretty quickly.
Oh, fantastic. You mentioned a little bit there, and we're going to get really into the sort of the history and take you back in time in a moment or two. But you mentioned a little bit about where in the UK you can be found, and I think this is a really relevant question. As a potential franchisee, if you're listening to this now, if you're listening to this in the future, it's important to understand perhaps where you're at now, and perhaps also where some of the gaps are as well.
Yeah, so we're not, right? Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we see the UK as somewhere in the region of 150 to 160 franchise territories. So we've got a way to go still. We're a little bit under halfway allocated. And the territories that are rewarded tend to have been sort of around population masses typically. So London is pretty well covered. Most of Kent is covered. We've got good availability on the south coast. We also have great availability in the southwest. Wales, got some great availability in Wales as well. Bizarrely, Birmingham, we don't have a franchisee, as is the case often with franchising. People say, why haven't you got someone in Birmingham? And we say, well, we've not found the right person yet. And pretty good coverage in the northwest, and then northeast is pretty open as well. We've got the central belt of Scotland is covered, so Glasgow, Edinburgh and Stirling on the in-between, but higher up into Scotland we've still got availability up there as well. So and equally Northern Ireland. So yeah, there's plenty of places that people could be from if they're interested in getting into the business.
Great, fantastic. Well, look, if you have just joined us today, this is Franchising Brand Stories, and today we are talking to the wonderful Dan Archer from Visiting Angels. Franchising Brand Stories is brought to you by FranRec, the specialist staff and executive recruiter for the UK franchise industry. Now, we're just about to get into the real meat and potatoes of this and discover where it all began for you. You've alluded a little bit to that in your sort of opening discussions. But this is really the part of the show where, if you are watching live, we really like to encourage your questions about the story, about the characters, about the businesses. So if you are here live, please put in a comment and we will do our best to answer that. Dan, let me take you back in time now.
The days before the grey hair, right?
Yeah, that's it. So where did it all begin? Was it the spark of the idea? You know, what made you
I think there's two sides to that, Harvey. I think yeah, I've often said about the sector that I operate in that people don't really know about home care unless they've worked in the sector or they've had care for a family member. And you know, my first exposure to adult social care was exactly that. I've been in franchising since the late 90s, but I'd not had anything to do with care at all until we needed care from my mum's mum, from my nan. So that was my first experience again. It wasn't a particularly positive experience, in truth. The care we had was particularly substandard. And shortly after that, I found myself in a position. I was talking at a BFA conference in 2011 on the stage in front of people at Telford, talking about social media, talking about Twitter actually. Shortly after that, was approached by a recruitment consultant and went into Home Instead. And you know, I'm very proud to say, very happy to say, I learnt my trade working for the world's largest private duty care provider, which is what Home Instead is. And you know, they were great to me. It was great for me to learn. Directly prior to starting this business, I was running another care business. I was running a European-owned care business called ProMedica 24. When I was at another conference, another BFA conference, and I woke up in June 2016 to the news that, in our infinite wisdom, we'd voted for Brexit. And the business model for ProMedica 24 was recruiting carers in Europe and bringing them into the UK. So when the UK says we don't want to be involved in Europe anymore, that's potentially problematic for that business model, right? So I found myself in a position questioning what I was going to be doing, and you know, got into beginning of 2017 and resigned my position with ProMedica. And when you run a large organisation like that and you quit, they put you on gardening leave. So I had 6 months of gardening leave to do some gardening and do some decorating and generally get under my wife's feet before Lucy said to me, just get out of the house and go and be gainfully employed doing something. So I started the research on what became Visiting Angels. Looked at nearly 50 care businesses actually in the 6 months that I had there. Looked at dom care businesses that were franchised, looked at independents, looked at corporate owned entities. And in that research process, something struck me as odd. I found that none of the businesses I looked at had a people focused mission statement. Their missions were all focused on clients and care delivery. They wanted to be outstanding care providers, or they wanted to be the care provider of choice, or they wanted to provide care the way a family member would expect it, right? Nobody was focusing on their staff. And actually in home care, the biggest problem that anybody in the home care business has got is where you find staff and how you keep those staff. So in a moment of clarity in summer 2017, I'm becoming increasingly proud to say I think I was the first person on the planet to use the words carer-centric. So the vision for Visiting Angels is to be carer-centric, to put caregivers first, to make caregivers the most important people in the organization. So when we launched with that being the drive behind the business. And I set a location up myself and piloted it. As I say, I've been in franchising a long time, but I'd never been a franchisee before, so I thought I probably ought to have a go at running a location to see how I could make it work before I then started working with franchisees that wanted to join. But that was sort of really the beginning. It was that recognition, I think, that there was a problem in the industry, which is how do you find care workers and how do you then keep care workers? And I wanted to put together a business model which rewarded caregivers better to enable us to have an advantage when it came to not only recruiting enough care workers, but also keeping them in the organisation.
I think it's really, really relevant. I mean, my wife worked in care for many years. She works still in the NHS, and she worked for many care agencies. And I think you picked up on a really relevant thing to look after those fantastic people that they are your business, and they are your business moving forward. And it's so important to look after those people. It was really interesting to hear that, that really the seeds of this was a little bit from a bad experience with your own family, and working out perhaps how you can make that a better experience, but not just, this is what's interested me, not just for that user experience, not just for the fantastic people that you look after, not just for the families of those people, but for the caregivers. And that's where the focus is. Mm-hmm. How did you? I mean, is that where the name of your business came from? Was because they are angels, aren't they? The people that walk, and they work.
The name Prees. I mean, it's a US business. It's been around for a long time. It's a very well established corporate player, franchise player in the US. They're actually the US's biggest brand. Actually, America's Choice in Home Care. To the point that it's a little aside, but it's quite funny. When Donald Trump wanted to be critical of Joe Biden's age, he was tweeting using the Visiting Angels TV theme tune. Right? It's a brand in the US which is synonymous with the delivery of care. And here's the thing: I'm a career marketing guy. I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about when it comes to marketing. My nervousness when I brought Visiting Angels to the UK was, will people get it? Are the Brits, because we're a little bit stiffer than the Americans, will we get it? And you know what? People love it. You're absolutely right. Everyone's desperate to call their carer an angel. They're desperate to do it, right? Because they are, and the difference they make to people's lives is that of an angel. So yeah, it's been amazingly useful as we've built the business out, because it's a brand that's very intuitive for people. People think they've heard the brand name even though they can't have heard the brand name yet, and that's useful in its own right for the development of the business. But ultimately it's an American brand name, and one that we're very proud to fly the flag for in the UK.
And it's a great name. It's a great name. We've got a question come in here, and also want to recognise the fact that we've got Julie Waits with us, the fantastic Julie Waits, and we've got a question that's come in here from Simon. And Simon's put, what steps did you take to build out your franchise system? Mm-hmm. It was really fascinating to hear, the origin stories of the business and your personal origin for that. I know it's a US brand, and you've got some structure and you've got the name there, but you had some real personal reasons for creating the business. But what steps did you take to sort of build this franchise business around what is a fantastic sounding and caring business?
Well, I think it's interesting that you've got Julie on, and Julie, I'm not speaking ill of you when I say this, but I didn't need a franchise consultant. I kind of, I'm quarter of a century in franchising, so I know my way around enough of what should happen in a franchise business to be able to build it from the ground up the right way. And I think that probably helped us, because I wasn't hamstrung by thinking I've got experience of doing it this way for another care brand, and therefore that's the way I'm going to think and do it for this, right? So I was afforded the luxury with the gardening leave to have enough time, but also was able to start with a completely blank sheet of paper and say, well, there are specifics within the way that the business is structured, which are designed to be able to give us the competitive advantage that not only I need, but also that my franchisees need. So the challenge when you bring something from overseas to the UK is knowing which bits are relevant and which bits translate and which bits are going to need to be modified and made specific for local market. And what I would say is that the brand, the way that you sell a private duty service, which the Americans are very, very good at. One of the reasons Home Instead have been the amazing success that they've been, and indeed the reason that Visiting Angels are the great brand that they are, is because the Americans are very, very good at how you sell a private service. So that was great. I also found that lots of the focus on retention were things that were already happening in the US, because many of the challenges that we face in the demographics of the UK are challenges that are faced also in America. So the fact that I was able to look at best practice competitions from 2013, where franchisees in the US had been thinking about what they could do to drive down caregiver turnover, that was very useful for me as well. But we started coming into a regulated environment in the UK where I didn't have any of that. No CQC framework, no policies that were fit for CQC, nothing that was UK market ready in terms of employment law. So we really had to sort of start from scratch with that. And yes, I worked with some amazing consultants in terms of franchise writer, the manual writers, the legal teams that we work with to put the contracts together, but also work with care industry advisors to be able to start putting the policies that we use together, HR advisors to be able to work on the right approach. We very early on worked with a clinical psychologist to start to understand, if people leave an organization, what are the things driving that lack of connection that makes them leave? And if we're going to be a business which is focused on retaining staff, what will we need to do differently as a result of that? So it's been a great pleasure to be able to build something absolutely from the ground up in that way. But I would say, the DNA from the US has been great, absolutely fantastic. And to be fair, the support we get from the US is also fantastic. But there was a specific challenge in respect of regulation and legislation in the UK that we had to sort of to do from the ground up.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, when you are taking a brand from the US, and this show is very much UK US, and I think our industry connects the two countries quite well. And the US have been doing it a lot longer, they're a lot more regulated, and it's sort of picking the bits that are good, picking the bits that are relevant, and then helping that mold into a new market, and a market that you obviously know really well. I mean, it's really interesting. You said your business is a people-centric business, and that's what sets you apart. What do you mean by people-centric, and how do you set yourself apart from other care businesses? Because your people are so important, and I think it's, before we start getting into the franchise business itself, I think when people are looking at this as an option, and they really want to, they're the sort of person that says, I really want to look after my people. People are important to me. Carers are important to me. What makes you different, and how do you get that people-centric business across?
Yeah, and the thing I very often say about this is that, I own a care business. I don't provide care, right? I mean, my Sheffield office delivers about 2,000 hours a week of care. I don't provide care. I employ people, and those people provide care, right? So my job as the business owner is to look after the people that actually go out there and do the daily work. So to be care-centric, how would I sum it up being care-centric? I think I've described it three ways, and I think there's three different ways of thinking about it. So I talk about loving caregivers, and then my team roll their eyes and shrug their shoulders when I talk about loving caregivers, because they're like, well, that's an amorphous way of describing it, Dan. What do you mean by that? They don't like me talking about loving carers. But the reality is that the work that a caregiver does for a family deserves all the love that you can give. And genuinely, the role that we complete when we're delivering care for a family is that the caregiver becomes a surrogate family member. We become part of that family unit, right? So it's really important from our perspective that we enable the love, and we also give the love to the people who are out there doing it. I could make a sensible argument for saying that even £60 an hour is not enough money for a carer for the difference they make to a family. And if it's then not about money because of that, it absolutely needs to be about the appreciation and the love that carers get. So, number one, I would say being carer-centric is about loving carers. I say number two, from a business perspective, and I say probably tactically from a business perspective, we ask ourselves the question before we decide to do anything: if we do that, does it improve the life of a caregiver? Because if it doesn't improve the life of a caregiver, it's not care-centric. And as a result of that, it doesn't matter how much money we might make doing that, we just don't do it because it's not care-centric. And then I would say probably the third way, and I think probably the best way of describing being carer-centric is to see the world through the eyes of a caregiver. And if you do that, if you actually place yourself in the shoes that your wife will have been in working in care, Harvey, then you're sort of looking through the eyes of a caregiver. You will ask yourself a lot of questions very quickly, which is the work a minimum wage job, or is it worth more than minimum wage? Is the job a job that should be done on a 0-hour contract or a proper hour contract? Is the job a job that deserves paid travel time, that deserves life insurance, that deserves perks like car servicing and car valets? Is it the sort of work that deserves the appreciation and celebration of your employer, right? Is it the sort of job that you ought to be having too much work to do in too little time on a regular basis, or did you probably ought to have more time in each visit to be able to provide the care you need to provide, right? So when you start, as I did, asking yourself those questions, you come up with an answer, which is, well, the solution to this, or part of the solution to this, is better pay, proper contracts, paid travel time, because when a carer is traveling between visits, they're working and they should be paid for that. Guaranteed pay uplifts every year, free life insurance, free car servicing, all of the things that we do, which are materialistic things, I guess, but also then the wonderful cultural stuff that goes with that, which is asking people and listening, helping people when they need help, celebrating people for how amazing they are. And those are the things which are the sort of softer side, I think, of them being carer-centric, which allow people to feel valued by their employer. So that means that commercially the business operates differently, but it means that the output from that is that we are very, very good at finding people, and we're exceptionally good at keeping people. You know, the industry average staff turnover in domiciliary care is anywhere between 50 and 70%, which is bonkers. You know, if you've got 100 care workers on 70% staff turnover, 70 of those are leaving every year. My average staff turnover nationally with Visiting Angels is at 11%.
Wow.
In our top performing officers, it's less than 5% staff turnover.
Wow.
And so we're in a place where people hardly ever leave your employment. When you recruit, you are able to build your team, but your clients receiving a service get a better service because they're getting the same carer coming every day of the week, which is ultimately what they want. Yeah.
Of course, they get to know them, don't they? Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that I think that was really the thing. Sort of, you know, when you look at the job in that way, and I asked myself the question, would I want to do that job? And the reality is that the answer is probably no. And as a sector, the home care space has got a vacancy rate in adult social care of somewhere like 132,000 empty jobs for the demand that exists today. And part of the reason for that is that not enough people are looking at the work that's done by caregivers and going, we need to make that job a more attractive job, an easier job, a job where there's more time to provide care and the caregivers feel more appreciated for the work they do.
And if you're looking at this as a franchise business, if you're a potential investor and you're looking at this as a business, when you're looking at a business that is all about people, the people in this business, there's no bricks and mortar, there's the product, you know, there's no real product. It's about giving care, and that comes from the people. And the training that you have to do for people, if you can keep people happy, and you're not having to continuously retrain people, I can see how that is a real element of the success and what makes you different. I was gonna, we're starting to talk about the people in your business, and now we're starting to talk maybe about the potential franchisees in your business, and always I think a good question. So again, you're a potential franchisee for this business, and you're thinking, well, what experience do I need? What skills do I need? Do I need to be a carer already? You know, or is it more about my values and, you know, and how I treat people? You know, do you look for people-centric franchisees right at the beginning?
Yes, is the answer to that. I mean, our mission, our vision, and our values are all based around the carer-centric ethos, right? So, if a franchisee doesn't agree with that, that's problematic. You know, I don't want to, and I do speak to occasionally people who love the brand name. They like the brand name. They love the idea of a care business that finds it easier to find carers, but they're not prepared to put themselves in a place whereby they say to everyone that will listen, caregivers are the most important people in my business. I think just let's think about what that actually looks like. Okay, we have an inverted organizational chart, Harvey, which makes me the least important person in my pilot business in Sheffield because my caregivers are more important than me. it makes every single franchisee in their location the least important person in their business, because their caregivers are more important than them. Okay. Now, the challenge again with franchising is that most people come into thinking about being a franchisee because they want the affirmation of being a business owner. And I'm saying the only way it really works in my business model is if you lead with humility. You have to be prepared to accept that your staff are more important than you are, because without them, you absolutely cannot be successful. Okay. So that means some people are just not the right person for us. If their values and their ethos and their vision don't match mine, that's problematic. I don't always look for people who've got sector experience. I mean, I think the challenge with the people within the sector is sometimes, through no fault of their own, through learned experience, they probably behave a certain way because of a sort of a reflex, a muscle memory of having done it like that for many years. And you know, we are a different organisation. We think and act differently, so we sort of need people that are able to do that. I would say that there's probably only two ways to run a care business. You either run a business which is a private duty focused business, or you run a business which is a local authority focused business. And if you're going to run a private duty focused business, you have to be able to communicate, because there is an inherent sales and marketing job to be done to promote your service, to be able to secure the private clients that you need to provide. And if you're running a local authority focused business, you've got a challenge of how you resource a difficult resourcing job. And those people tend to be blinkers on, eyes down sort of people, whereas the salespeople tend to be eyes up, talk to the world sort of people. So they're a different sort of character that is better suited to the private duty business. But I would also say that, you know, there's an element of iconoclast about me. I tend to be sort of, you know, looking at the system and the industry that I operate in, and you know, I'm very regularly on a soapbox complaining about some of the challenges that exist within the social care space. And I'm sort of looking for my franchisees to also be that. I want them to be a creative thinker that wants to challenge a received wisdom and do something about changing the world that we live in. So that means, again, that not everybody necessarily suits that.
Julia's just put up a question, and it just seems too perfect not to put up right now, because you just said, Dan, that you're often passionate about trying to change the industry and trying to re-educate people as to a different way of doing things. And Julie's put, I might steal this question for the future, Julie, but Julie's put, if you had a magic wand for the business, what would you wave it at, Dan? And I'm throwing this one in here because I love this question, actually.
That's a great question, Hans. I would say, you know, I talk a lot about the second part of our mission statement is to redefine the role of carers in society. And I say during franchise, we've got franchise training going on this week, so I've said to the guys who are on training this week, you know, you can, if you want, redefine the role of carers in society by winding down the window in your car and shouting at passers-by in the street, right? I mean, it's hard work to do it that way, one person at a time, you know. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to work my way onto broadcast media, and when you do it on broadcast media, you're able to maybe have a few more people hear the message, and it's a bit easier again to redefine the role of carers in society then. But when I started the business, I was ready for that part of the mission being a challenge, right? Because society is everybody. So redefining the role of carers in society is a big ask, yeah. I genuinely wasn't ready for how difficult it is to redefine the role of carers in the eyes of carers. And so to answer your question, Julia, I would love for caregivers to recognise that they deserve all of the wonderful things that we do for them, because too often when we talk to people about joining Visiting Angels as a caregiver, they don't believe it. They say it sounds too good to be true. I worked for an organisation that promised me this stuff in the past and they just didn't deliver on it. And there's an element to my character which has sort of got me in the white knight box. I like to ride into a room and say, "Don't worry, we shall save you with money and love." And you can only really do that if people actually are prepared to accept that love when you give it, right? So if I had a magic wand that I could wave, I would wave it at every caregiver in the country so that they actually appreciated that there is a different way, there is a better way, and that when we tell them we're going to do the things we're going to do, we are actually going to deliver on that, you know? I'll tell you a little story around this. It's interesting. When we first got going, one of the silly things that we do to engage with people is that after a caregiver's been in the business for 6 months, we bring them into the office, because one of the challenges is in home care is that they don't spend enough time coming into the office. So we're trying to find excuses to bring people into the office. So after 6 months of service, we used to bring people into the office and we do the car valet for them. And I said, well, I have a cleaner that comes into my office that cleans the office, so we'll get somebody to clean your office for you and clean your car, right? And we had a lady called Lavinia who was working for us at the time. She was sat in reception crying. And I said, Lavinia, what are you crying for, love? She said, you're cleaning my car. And I'm like, your car's not that dirty though. Why are you crying? And it turns out the reason she was crying was because when we told her that we were going to clean her car, she didn't believe that we would do such a silly sounding thing. So when we actually did it, she had a bit of an emotional release because she thought, well, maybe they're going to do all of the daft stuff that I didn't believe. Yeah. And she just allowed herself to believe a little bit more, you know? So yeah, that's probably where I wave the magic wand.
Love it. Fantastic question as well, Julie. Thank you. We've got another question here from Simon, and this is a really good one because I think that this is really important. So potential franchisees that are listening to this have heard some fantastic stories. They've heard the origin story, going like the Marvel films here, but they've heard the beginnings. But I think a really important thing to touch on is what happens between that first point of contact with Visiting Angels and the time where they're starting to run their business.
Well, like you said, we need to get some time to get to know each other, right? I'm an old-fashioned guy, so we need to do some dating, I suppose, is the way to think of it. You know, was the thing about marry in haste, repent at leisure, right? So I think you know we spend a lot of time just trying to get under the hat, if I can steal it, Harvey, of the prospect, and to allow them to do the same with us, right? And I think there's a blessing and a curse in our industry in that there are, I think at last count, there are something like 22 franchise dom care providers. So there are many people looking at franchising in domiciliary care, and there are differences between those businesses, and the people who are right for me are right for me, and the people who are right for somebody else are right for somebody else, okay? So we've got to try and find out whether they're right for us. So I'm a huge fan of multiple meetings. We don't do anything quickly, so you know we'll take an inquiry, we engage with that inquiry very quickly, normally with an email or a WhatsApp response, and try and start the conversation moving. That will allow the prospect to gather a bit more information on us. We typically send them franchise information packs and some documentation, and you know, inevitably some video links, because now the world is in video, so it's possible for us to show case studies of franchisees and videos from our annual conference and anything I might have done on the TV or the radio that they might find to be useful and interesting as background to what we're about as an organisation. And then if they're starting to move in the right direction and the interest is good interest, we'd be looking at scheduling a Teams call. One of the few things that we have the pandemic to thank, or we thank the pandemic for, I guess, is that we all do this video conferencing thing far more than we used to pre-pandemic. So that's very useful. It allows us to get some FaceTime with the franchisee. And then quite quickly, we're then saying, well, the next logical step is for you to make the effort of a trip to Sheffield, which is where our head office is. I do say, for those in the south that are not aware of it, we do have running water, we have electricity as well. It's actually quite pleasant in South Yorkshire.
No, you're joking me.
No, I know, but don't tell too many people, because us Yorkshire folk don't like people coming up here and spoiling it, right? But no, it is the thing about coming to the office, because they're investing in a franchisor. I've got an office here with 11 full-time support staff in it. I want them to come in to meet that support staff so that they can see what it is they're paying for. But also my pilot business is just down the road from the head office that I'm sat in here now, and that runs, as I say, it does around 2,000 hours a week of care. It's got about 100 people working within it. So if they are going to run a business that's ultimately eventually going to look like that, they need to go and spend some time in it to find out whether they like it. And I very often say, look, if standing in the middle of a busy home care office scares the living daylights out of you, at least we've learned that early on, right? And so from then, we would then do a bit more structured meeting in terms of illustrative financial projections and territory mapping stuff. And we'd send a franchisee away to do their due diligence. And their due diligence would be them producing a business plan, which they then present back to us for us to be persuaded that we're happy, that they understand enough about the business and they've done enough research. And typically when we do the meeting to review that business plan, I will make an effort, or my team will make an effort to go and meet that franchisee in location. Try and meet them from home if we can do, to get to a point where at that point we're saying, okay, is this something that we might be interested in really looking at? And if that's the case, we then look at a deposit, and that would allow someone the opportunity then to move through legal evaluations, to start the CQC application process. It's quite key we do that quickly because it takes the time to do that. To negotiate office premises, and we've had a win this week because one of our new guys has enabled me to beat up the landlord of their location. I quite like doing that. So I've kind of waded into helping them to get a better deal on their property. And then we're starting to look at planning franchisee training, which is 4 weeks in total, and looking at a go live date. So yeah, that's kind of what we do at this.
Fantastic. It's nice to hear you take your time on that process, and it's a gradual thing. It's also interesting to hear that your potential franchisees put a business plan together to present to you. Mm-hmm. I like that as an idea. They're yes, you're giving them the framework to run a business, but they're telling you how they're going to do it and what ideas they've got and being proactive about it, and I think that's a really interesting and refreshing thing to hear, and I really like that.
Yeah, we give them a framework to operate in, Harvey, but I've never been a fan of allowing them to use a third party to do that. I always tell them, if you can't write the business plan, you stand no chance of running the business, right? So at the very least, they've got to be able to write the plan.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we've touched a little bit on the type of people that you might want in your business. Why does that keep disappearing? There we go. Come back. But I suppose a good question now is, people have got an idea listening to this as to what they're going to go through, first of all, on that prospect journey. But who do you want? Have you got, I'm going to use the expression avatar, but is there a type of person?
Yes, I didn't mention through the selection process, we have a psychometric testing process that we use, and the psych profiles are not a silver bullet for whether a franchisee is going to be successful or not. But one of the advantages that I've got is we're part of an international network with 830 odd franchisees in 5 countries around the world. So when I look at the site profile, the benchmark in the site profile has got a benchmark for what a good performing franchisee looks like. Now, most of those are American good performing franchisees, so sometimes we have to look at the results and maybe interpret them slightly to say, well, there's an element of that reaction there, which is because we're British, not American, but it very much does give us a clear indication of the things that we're needing from a skill set perspective. So, as I said, we want communicators, we want people that are people focused, we need people with emotional intelligence, we need people with resilience. There are far easier ways of earning a living than running a home care business. We are. My Sheffield office, as I say, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, and people in franchising who are watching this will say, well, being in franchising is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, that means I'm running 2 businesses which are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? There is somebody from Visiting Angels providing care to someone in their home every single hour of every single day across the UK now. And some people can deal with that and are happy with that, and some people are less happy with that. I would say probably as a really big marker, we are looking for people that want to make a difference. People that want to make a difference in the lives of carers, which will ultimately make a difference in the lives of the people that receive care. And as a result of seeking people that want to make a difference, we end up making a profit. Right? If you set out to make a profit, very rarely do you make a difference. And I'm sure the accountants would argue, if you set out to make a profit, you probably don't make the profit you want to either, right? So making a difference is a pretty good measure for whether someone's the right sort of franchisee.
Absolutely. Fantastic. If you have just joined us today, this is Franchising Brand Stories, and today we are talking to the wonderful Dan Archer from Visiting Angels. And Franchising Brand Stories is brought to you by FranRec, the executive and staff recruiters for the UK's franchise industry. Again, if you have just joined us today, there's a QR code on the screen that will take you to this episode, and you can rewatch it or watch it from the beginning if you've missed the start. I want to ask a question, and it's my favorite question to ask. You've got a great deal of franchisees, and also you're in a business where you make a difference to 3 different levels of people. You make the difference to the franchisee with the business that they've got. You make the difference to the caregivers, and you make the difference to the people who receive the care. And in amongst that, you must have really changed in people's lives on multiple occasions. And I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of stories. But do any stick out in your mind over that period of time?
We work with a PR company to help us to tell some of those stories in the wider press, right? And I think one of the things that RevPR very regularly say to us is that when they first start, the franchisees are sort of amazed by the things that we do. And then unfortunately, very quickly, they become a little bit sort of blasé about how amazing some of the things that they do are, right? Because when you're making so much of a difference, when you've got so many life-changing stories, sometimes you sort of do stuff and take it for granted that that's what you've done. And actually other people would look at that and go, that's amazing, you know? We did my first ever solo assessment when I was piloting the business. This is a story to tell. So we got our registration with the Care Quality Commission. And we grew relatively quickly, and in our third or fourth month of operation, we had something like 9 new clients in a single month. And my registered care manager was going around the place and doing assessments and writing care plans. But we had a point where we both needed to be out on assessment simultaneously. So I went to go and do my first solo assessment to a lady called Betty, who lived in South Sheffield. And I thought I did a decent job of the assessment. My manager told me it was probably the worst assessment she'd ever made, and gave me lots of points of improvement. And I kind of, I got better as we went along, basically. But the thing with Betty was Betty, her daughter lived in Manchester and Betty lived in Sheffield. And she'd not left the house for 18 months. She had vascular dementia. She had a stroke. She had vascular dementia. And we're in Sheffield, which means all of the roads are like this, and the roads next to them are like this. And you sort of need clampons to get to the end of the street, you know. So she wasn't leaving the house because she was worried about falling. And her daughter lived in Manchester, and their only way of communicating was by the post. So they used to send each other letters, but she couldn't get to the post box. So the inquiry that we took was, could you possibly spend 2 hours with my mum on a Sunday afternoon and take her to the post box, and so she can write a letter to me so I know how she's getting on? No problem at all. I assessed that case. We did that case, no problem at all. As part of that assessment process, there was a cleaner that was coming in. The cleaner was doing maybe 3 or 4 days a week of cleaning. Now, the house wasn't that dirty. It didn't need 3 or 4 days a week of cleaning. The cleaner was, in essence, doing a little bit more than cleaning. Mm-hmm. And once we turned up as the professional care company, the cleaner just disappeared very quickly, right? So they'd gone. And now the daughter's saying to me, can you guys come in maybe 4 days a week? And that became 5 days a week. And we went from a lady that had not left the house for 18 months to getting her on a Sunday to pop up to the post box to post a letter, to then enabling her to go to the Botanical Gardens in Sheffield, to taking her to the theatre, to enabling her to go to Meadowhall in Sheffield, which is a big shopping centre, to go to Marks and Spencer's, to buy a posh sandwich, because that is a thing, yeah. And so all of these things that she sort of got her life back. And so that was amazing, right? And I think then, our franchisees sort of see that on a daily basis. People talk about care, and people very often talk about essential care, and that's very much about helping people out of bed and helping people with medication and helping people with nutrition. And all of those things are very important. But actually, the thing that we try to do as a home care business is give people independence. And that means trying to give them their life back, right? And there's probably nothing more satisfying in actual fact than having that level of impact on another human being's life, to positively impact the life of your carers to a point whereby they are able to help a client to rediscover a passion they had 20 years ago.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's about people who want to make a difference, and what a difference someone made to that person's life, and that's the essence of it, isn't it? We're starting to get towards the end of things today, but let's see if we can give people an idea. I mean, you have given us an idea of what a day in the life of a franchisee could look like, but what does that look like? I mean, can you do it part-time? Can it be a management? Is it, what does that day look like for a franchisee?
Okay, well, a great question. These are the nitty-gritty questions, right? So it cannot be part-time. It's a more than full-time commitment. And the reality, I had a conversation this week with our franchisee in Stirling in central Scotland, and she's our fastest growing ever. The business is growing so quickly, and she's running all over the place at the moment, desperately trying to keep the wheels spinning and help them to spin faster, right? Now, what I would say is the effort that a franchisee puts into the first 18 months, 2 years or 3 years of the life of their business will pay them a dividend downstream. Like when you build that reputation, that brand, one of the nice things about a home care business is that if you're doing a very good job, it's a recurring revenue business. Your private clients will use you every single week and continue to pay you as long as they need care, okay? But in the first instance, it is frantic. It's how many people can we talk to? How many people can we create brand awareness with? How many caregivers can we recruit? How quickly can we scale the business? So that means for a franchisee in the first year, they're going to spend a lot of their time promoting the business as the face of the business in the local community. A lot of time working with their care manager, and it's a management franchise. From day one, there will be another employee in the business. That person will be recruiting carers, but absolutely the franchisee is part of that recruitment process as well. And then as the business starts to scale, we're bringing in supervisors and care coordinators, so that really by the end of the third year of a plan, when the franchisees may be doing about 1,000 hours of care a week, they're going to have 6 full-time office staff and a team of 70 some carers, and they're running an entity of a certain size then. And at that point, once you start getting other people coming into the organization, it's possible for the franchisee to be more focused and specialist on the things that they do, and to allow other people in the organization to take more of a lead on things like recruitment and care management and the planning of routes and schedules. But to start with, as I did when I was piloting the business, the franchisee has to do all of those things.
Absolutely, and I think that gives a really good idea, because again, what you're trying to understand when you're listening to something like this and you're trying to understand a business is, what's it going to be like, when we're running it. And I think that gives a fantastic insight into that, coupled with what was such a lovely story. And I think that's really powerful. So thanks so much for answering that so concisely. We are coming now to the last part of today's episode, which is chapter 3. We go in order here. And this is where we're going to talk about the future. Mm-hmm. This is where you give us the Franchising Brand Stories exclusive, Dan. This is where you do it. So perhaps you could give us an idea of what's coming up in the future for Visiting Angels here, what we can expect. While you do that, there is a QR code on the screen that will take people to the franchise section of the Visiting Angels website. So please scan that now or in the future if you're interested in finding out more. And let's find out what's going to go on in the future.
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. I can't really answer this question, Harvey, right? Because here's the thing. So we went into the first lockdown of the pandemic with a small franchise network, and we were growing, and we were trying to grow as quickly as we could. And we got some good support, and we had some frustrations through that process. But I've always done a thing with my team in the pilot business, and our franchisees do the same with theirs, where we try to get together collectively. So we've always had Christmas parties and Easter egg hunts and summer barbecues and a fireworks party, right? But we came out of the pandemic, and I was like, right, we need a proper summer barbecue. We've grown quite a lot, so I had a bit of a mad idea, and I started a music festival called Carefest, which was a live music festival for the care sector. We held it in South Yorkshire, and in the first year we had a band on, and we had a hog roast, and we had an ice cream van, and it was all very lovely, and all of my caregivers came, and all of their families came, and some other people that worked in the care sector in South Yorkshire all came to it, and a few of our franchisees came, and it was great, right? And then it sort of grew legs, and the year after it got bigger, and the year after it got bigger. And this year, so Carefest 2024, we had a main stage which had Sonia, who was a 1980s, 1990s pop star, had a #1 record, performed live at Carefest. Carefest was live streamed on local radio. We had nearly 600 people come to Carefest. I employ 100 people, right? Which means most of the people coming to Carefest were not my team; they were other people in the local community, right? So we did that. We had a music festival basically, and then again earlier on this year, I always say I've got a toddler in our house, which means I don't get to enjoy a bath. So when I'm away on business, I'll try and book a hotel room that's got a bath. And I was lying in a bath in a hotel on my way down to London for a meeting, and I was listening to Michael McIntyre's Saturday Night Takeaway and thinking, "Ooh, talent contest. We could do that. We could have a talent contest, right?" So we did Home Care's Got Talent, right? And I persuaded a few other people in the care industry that I wasn't entirely insane by thinking about doing this thing, and we put together a talent contest. I can see that Julie saw that it was in York with Ian Donachie. It was absolutely in York. We had a theatre in York with 300 people in the audience, and we offered 50,000 carers the chance to enter, and we had 30 people who got to the semi-finals and 12 finalists, and it was a lovely thing, but it was a bonkers idea that sort of grew legs. So in answer to the question of what the future, I don't know. I mean, we've done music festivals and talent contests, and neither of those things are anything to do with care or franchising, but we've done them.
Brilliant.
My wife did say to me, so what are you now, like a low rent Simon Cowell? And I'm like, well, thanks for the low rent bit, love. But I kind of like, it's that thing. The thing about what we try to do, the thing about the talent con, here's the thing with the talent contest, right? If you were to stop 10 people in the street, an uncomfortable number of those people would say that the work that's done by home care workers is unskilled work. And they could not be more wrong, genuinely, okay? So when we did the talent contest, it was beautiful for me to be able to say, here's a lady that sings opera and changes a stoma bag. Now you tell me that lady's not talented, right? So it's been joyous to do that sort of thing. So I don't know what the next crazy thing will be. I do know that last week I was in Germany because we were looking at launching the business in Germany. I was on a franchise exhibition stand in Germany, which was a wonderful thing to do. I do know that we're coming into our annual conference next week, and I've got 300 people coming to our gala dinner on the evening of our conference. So I'm sure whatever we do, it's going to be an amazing ride that we're going to enjoy. And I would equally say that the franchisees that come to us will also enjoy as well. But as for predicting it, I don't know. I genuinely.
You know what? It sounds like you're doing some wonderful things, and sometimes the future can be doing more of the same. And you're doing some great stuff. I love some of those ideas because, they really fit into your values of looking after and being people centric, especially that, that talent show. Brilliant. Great idea. Love it. Before we talk about what's going to happen next week, have you got any final thoughts you'd just like to leave people with that have watched today or are going to listen to this in the future?
Yes, I'm going to take an opportunity to say to as many people as I possibly can do, if you see somebody in care who wears a uniform, Visiting Angels caregivers don't wear a uniform, but most caregivers do wear a uniform. If you see a caregiver anywhere, in the street, in a supermarket, in a doctor's surgery, in a pharmacist, just stop and say thank you. I think, during the pandemic, we went through a phase of standing on our doorsteps on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock and clapping for carers and banging our pots and pans. And there are many of us in the sector who would say that the society's gone back to not clapping and not banging pots and pans anymore. But care workers are still working as hard as they ever did. So as I say, a part of the way I define being carer-centric is loving carers. And I genuinely think that love and appreciation is probably the biggest gift that most can give. So if you get a chance to thank a carer, please do that.
Hear, hear. I certainly will be doing that. Well, look, I would like to say, first of all, thank you to the people that have been here live today. Thank you to people who are going to watch this in the future. And thank you to you, Dan, for sharing your wonderful story and explaining all about Visiting Angels. It's been a really fascinating story. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Sorry?
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. So next week on the Franchise Show, we are talking to Mark Harmon, and we are talking all about franchise filming and the role that video plays in our journeys as franchisors. So please join us Tuesday, 19th of November at 5:15 GMT for that. And next Thursday on Franchising Brand Stories, we are going to be speaking with Ian Cristello from Action Coach, and we're going to be hearing what's under the hat of that brand. So please join us next Thursday at 5:15 for that, and until next time, take very good care. Cheerio.